Pay for HBO Max now. Streaming now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna get this kicked off in just 1 minute. I'm gonna go ahead and start my screen share. And thank you to all the attendees who've jumped in. The Q&A line is open. You can feel free to just chat any questions throughout the way, and as it makes sense to get to it, we'll jump into it. It looks like, Cameron, you have been getting a couple of notes in the chat about Euphoria. More dysfunctional than Shameless. It's awesome. So you've got fans, fellow fans of Euphoria. All right, let me go ahead and start my screen share, and we'll get ready to start this off in just a second. Great. All right, and I always give till 10:05 promptly. So if anyone has any last minute, throwouts of new shows, feel free in the 1 minute you have.
Yeah, I'm running out of content, so please throw something out.
If you like Dysfunction, ring endorsement behind The Boys on Amazon Prime. Dark underbellies of superheroes could be. So I'll throw that out there. It's one that we're really into right now. Season 2 just dropped.
Oh, okay, I'm in. I loved what was the Hunters? Is that the one that they just had? I watched that and it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. And it looks like we're at start time. So thank you everyone who's joining us, and welcome to the Audio Best Practices panel. We have a great panel lined up for you today with people across the board from different audio providers. We're really excited to be here and chat with you guys about Q4 strategy as we head out of yet another quarantine quarter, as we're starting to call them, the QQs, and into another. So to kick us off, I'm Lauren Hutton. I work for AUDIENCEX, and I am the VP of Growth. I help oversee our sales marketing efforts, as well as some of our strategic efforts and engaging with our clients. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and in the spirit of today, would love to hear what each of you are listening to. And I'll personally start off. I recently did a full binge of Doctor Who, so I am obsessed with David Tennant's podcast. I highly recommend it. He's got some great British folk that come on and some pretty hilarious commentary. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Chris Lane to start the intros.
Yeah, Lauren, first off, appreciate you hosting us, and looking forward to the panel. Yeah, my name is Chris. I'm the Director of Sales over at TuneIn. I've been with TuneIn for 5.5 years. Before that, I was with CBS Interactive. Before that, I was living in North Carolina. That's where I grew up. I'm a huge Duke basketball fan, and a Duke basketball game is actually the reason I stumbled upon TuneIn about 7 or 8 years ago. Found the app, listened to the game, found a bunch of other great content, and ended up working there, which is crazy. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. In terms of podcasts, audio, it is a podcast. I recently finished one called Wind of Change. Wind of Change was a song that was released by a German rock band called the Scorpions in the late 80s. It was very popular in the United States, also in Russia. But the basis for the podcast is there's a rumor that, in fact, the CIA was responsible for the writing of the song, and they did it in order to sway hearts and minds in communist Russia towards the end of the Cold War, and sort of, win people over who were witnessing the Berlin Wall falling and all those good things. So if you're into politics or, anything related to music, it's a nice sort of storytelling podcast, and they interview some really cool people from sort of both sides of the story.
Chris, I gotta say, I think you're deep in some of the cult conspiracy type series right now. And I love it. I'm gonna pass it over to Jim. Jim, do you mind giving us an introduction to who you are?
Absolutely. My name is Jim. I'm currently the CTO at PodcastOne. I've been here for going on 7 years later this month. And before that, I was working for Premier Networks for 5 years in syndicated radio. Always been a big fan of audio. I jumped into audio right after college. I graduated in 2008 and really just hit the ground running in audio. I've always loved it. And podcasting, as far as digital, always appealed to me because I grew up on the internet effectively. So getting to help grow and build this space has always been really attractive to me. And it's fun to watch kind of the industry growth since I've started. It started a lot in the broadcast model, and as it's gotten older and more progressive, bringing programmatic and bringing more digital initiatives.
Oh no, it looks like we have a work from home glitch with Jim. We'll give him one more second to unfreeze. I think this is probably all of our least favorite parts of work from home. Oh, Jim's back.
I'm back.
Back.
Yes, unstable internet, but I'm here. No, so drive.
Spoke too soon.
Oh no.
There we go. There we go.
Okay. So I'm glad I can just add digital focuses into effectively. So to that end, what I'm listening to right now, Big Scrubs Junkie, that TV show. So Fake Doctors, Real Friends has been a big hit of mine. I was kind of listen to that show.
Love that. And moving along, Cameron, do you mind giving us an introduction?
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi panelists and everyone on the line. My name's Cameron White. I've been at Pandora about 1.5 years, coming up to 2 years very, very quickly. Prior to that, I was in the startup world, actually stopped over at AUDIENCEX for a little bit. So nice seeing you again, Lauren.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I was working in LA and on the East Coast at Yahoo. I was there for about 6-7 years, wore several hats throughout the company, from a display coordinator all the way up to like an account director when I left. Just working in audio, being at Pandora over the last 1.5 years, 2 years, I've always touched audio, but obviously been able to focus on it more, working with advertisers, working with DSPs and trading desk. And it's, I'm sure we'll get into this, but it's just a medium that's growing. I think there's a lot of excitement around it. It's very interesting in terms of, how to layer that within your ad strategy. So really excited about it and all the things sort of moving forward. And what I'm listening to today, pretty boring with podcasts. I listen to a lot of self-help, finance, real estate podcasts, but I actually started listening to Jay Electronica's album that recently came out under Rock Nation. It's awesome. The story behind that is he was signed about 8 or 9 years ago. And, a lot of his fans have just been waiting for his album to come out. It recently did a few months back. So I've been enjoying that over the last few days.
Love it. And to close us out, Jean-Louis, can we get an introduction?
Hello, I'm senior consultant at AudioValley. It's the company behind Targetspot. And basically, I did Rome, Europe, and North America as head of AdOps for Targetspot for the past couple of years. I'm completely into French pop for music at the moment, and I'm watching Star Trek Next Generation with Jean-Luc Picard. So this is me.
Nice. And we did get a few great chats from people on the line. Mandalorian is another one that people are loving watching. But if there's any great things that you're listening to, please feel free to throw those in the chat as well so that everyone gets to benefit from what you're listening to. Really quickly, before we jump into conversation with the panelists, I want to go over why we're all here today. Why is it important? And right now, there's 2 key things we want to hit on why digital audio now. Right now in 2020, there's about a 70% penetration of the US population, meaning that roughly 211 million people are listening to digital audio. And over the next 4 years, that's only expected to continue to increase by about another 11 million by 2024. So clearly the US population is very engaged with digital audio. When we look at time spent with digital audio across this 70% penetration of the population, it's about 81 minutes per day spent listening to these, to the streamed medium. So effectively, we really need to be focused on digital audio if we want to advertise and message to individuals in a medium that they're spending their time, that they're heavily engaged with. And again, over the next 2 years, that time spent with digital audio is only going to increase. So not only is the population engaged with it, but it's continuing to grow both in time spent and number of people listening. But what are some of the current problems with digital audio? I mean, today we're here to talk about best practices. And in talking about best practices, it's, only our due diligence that we're all a bit honest about where digital audio is at and the different types of digital audio that we're going to discuss. Right now, lack of scale tends to be a major issue for some advertisers. Only a small share of digital radio advertising is currently being traded programmatically. That'll increase to about 16.5 points this year. But over the next 2 years, we're expecting $1 billion worth of digital radio ads to be traded through automated means. So again, there's a little bit of a lack of scale right now, but it seems that very much so the digital audio environment or industry is trying to catch up and create this scale because the demand is very clearly there. When we do talk about podcasting specifically, and Jim will get into this a little bit more as the CTO of PodcastOne, but there's even less so of a programmatic pipe to that medium, with just about 4% of programmatic or podcast advertising happening through programmatic means. So those are some of the issues that we're going to talk about from the publisher side, from the vendor side. But when we talk about some of the issues that we've noticed our brands and marketers coming up against when it comes to programmatic audio is really the planning for it. Advertisers are struggling to figure out how to fit programmatic audio into their plans. Should it be bought on a standalone basis? Should it be integrated into an omni-channel plan? Where are we finding the budget for the channel? Seems to be another struggle. According to eMarketer, pool funds come from reallocation of terrestrial radio, traditional media, local advertising efforts, and some other forms of digital. So we've seen that people are in a lot of instances trying to pull from other buckets, and in some instances are able to actually get incremental for the channel, which is of course always in the best interest of a brand to be spending more in advertising and get more share of voice. And one of the other things that we've noticed is that advertisers are sort of struggling to find the right KPIs for digital audio. Currently, KPI metrics such as CTR are being used to measure performance rather than things that are audio specific that we want to focus on today, such as listen through rate. So just a brief introduction to the topics that we're going to try to address today. Of course, this is a totally open Q&A. So anyone who has questions, please feel free to come into the question chat and ask questions. We'll try to address those as we go. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and get back to the lovely panelists. So I'm going to kick this off first and foremost to Chris over at TuneIn. Chris, as an audio streaming service that delivers live news, radio, sports, music, and podcasts, to start us off, how do you define the different types of programmatic audio that can be utilized? And how do you discuss that with your clients? Do you talk about it by creative type? Do you talk about it by channel type? Would love to get a sense of how we can even begin the conversation about the different buckets.
Yeah, totally. I was telling Lauren, and I'm now 2 for 2. I feel like over the last 6 months, people have accomplished amazing things, side hustles and whatnot. If I can remember just to unmute a Zoom meeting, I feel like I've accomplished a lot. So I'm doing very well so far today. Yeah, when it comes to TuneIn, we really run the gamut in terms of audio content. We do want to be a service that provides all things audio to our users. But the thing that sort of ties it all together is the fact that we're delivering live audio content with a human that's sort of the voice of that content. There are what we call can't miss moments that really matter to people on our platform. So whether that's a Duke basketball game, as it was for me, or the upcoming election, some sort of political debate, a live stream of a music festival, or even someone who every morning listens to a morning DJ show on their morning commute. These are what we call can't miss moments, where our users are very engaged in that listening session and all ears. So when we're talking about the ad experience that we present to them, we want to be very thoughtful. We don't want to detract from their experience. So we do that by inserting audio creative dynamically in a linear fashion, both in a pre-stream position and also in an in-stream position, and where it calls for it, serving a companion banner where it's appropriate. Things like smart speakers, obviously, there wouldn't be one, but in most cases, there's a companion unit. What this does is it gives us the ability to reach an engaged user the right engaged user at the right time in a non-disruptive way, regardless of the content type they're consuming and regardless of what device they happen to be on. It also allows our clients to scale their audio assets through programmatic means across our 30 million users, the 200 different devices where we're available, and the 125,000 stations that we provide. In general, we get positive feedback from our listeners, which is very important. But back to what you were saying about listen through rates and audio completion rates, those tend to be very strong with this model as well.
Awesome. And you brought up companion banners, and I want to kick this over to Cameron, because when you think Pandora, when you think of it from an advertiser's perspective, or at least myself and the conversations I've had with our advertisers, we always think companion banner. We always think about the display asset that goes alongside of it. And Pandora seems to be the go-to for the combo. Cameron, do you struggle to find people leaning towards those audio specific KPIs like LTR because you have the companion banner offering, and how do they complement each other?
Yeah, no, and I think, and thank you, Lauren, and Chris, I think touched on a good point. Just, general audio is sort of everywhere from a user standpoint. I think from a marketing standpoint, we are getting to the point where like the shift in audio, can't be ignored. With new technologies, we're listening to our phones. So brands sort of have to be there in the streaming audio marketplace. So as that investment shifts, we're trying to figure out like the best ways to measure audio for effectiveness and performance. I think we all know, I think we're to the point where we know like audio can help brands in terms of increased awareness, but how can it help with sort of low, more middle to lower funnel performance? One of the ways that we can do that, as you mentioned, is, using a companion banner with an audio ad as an option. Within our platform of Pandora and SoundCloud, you do have the opportunity, if you do run audio programmatically, to layer on that companion banner at the end of an audio ad. With that companion banner, that just helps sort of visualize the call to action that's within your ad recall, and also helps to lead more, it helps to lead more site conversions, which obviously leads to higher engagement. So that's sort of the way we leverage the companion banner with audio. Another tactic we've actually been using more recently with our advertisers is to run a small display campaign to complement the audio ad through retargeting. So someone's able to see, someone's able to hear a call to action within an audio ad, and then you're able to get them again as they're within our marketplace with a different call to action or a way to convert. So I think those two tactics of using, displays, retargeting, as well as a companion banner, actually, we've seen more site engagement and lower funnel conversions looking at a 30-day window.
I love that, because I mean, historically, when you think, not historically, I was going to say when you think of programmatic, and then I realized how ironic it is to use historic and programmatic in the same sentence. Idiotic, I should say, not ironic. But I would say generally when we speak about programmatic, we talk about that, like the significance of omni-channel type messaging, the significance of learning from different tactical methodologies and channels and marrying them together to create success. So I love that that's something that even someone who is so, audio specific, like Pandora and SoundCloud, are utilizing those types of tactics and recognizing the significance of combination of channels. This also leads me to my next question, which I'm gonna, kick over to Targetspot and Jean-Louis. You work with clients on a daily basis. How do you create use cases for each of the different types of audio? I mean, Chris gave us a really great overview, but there was a lot to take in there. So how do you start to approach what makes sense for which client?
Well, essentially, I see three pillars to do so. The first one maybe is performance. As weird as it sounds, there is no mystic or magic beyond performance measurement on audio. I mean, of course, some like SoundCloud, TuneIn have the chance to have clicks that drives to website, but most of the inventory is actually without companion banner. So it's like, okay, someone is listening to audio, but does it perform? And yes, I mean, audio, just like display and video, is sitting on the internet protocol. And it's important that everyone knows we are getting first-party data. We're getting the IP, maybe the age, gender, location, device ID. So a lot of things that tell us if a format, if an audio type that is maybe sports, news, performs or does not perform. So really online, offline attribution is a first key to create those use case. Then the second pillar would be industry market related. For example, you have to know your market. Like France, in France, they're still buying brands. They don't care much of the performance, more brands than performance, honestly. In the US, it's more the audience that is key. They prefer to have that 30-year-old person than the brand. In Belgium, they don't care, they just buy everything. So you need to know a little bit the market you're evolving into, and then the industry. Obviously, we know that in Europe, in general, news is welcome. I mean, everyone is tuned in. The attention level is very high. Everyone loves news and wants to be doing ads before news. In the US, it's a love-hate tragedy. I mean, retailers usually try to flee from news and they don't want that kind of formats. While finance and insurance and loans kind of products, they'd like to be there. So it's so you have to know what industry you're working with to recommend the appropriate formats and make sure you're on point. And finally, I would say that the latest pillar are the formats themselves. I mean, there is two dimensions to audio. Of course, there's like channels like podcast and text to speech and other stuff, but there is also I mean, hip hop, rap, country, and you have to know what how they evolve. I mean, if you take country music, there is a young audience for country music now. So maybe you have to know about it. Hip hop and rap kind of stole a lot of audience to rock music. So you have to keep a tab on the trends and the statistics from all those formats to be able to propose a plan that is really ad hoc on point with the needs. So I believe with these three pillars, you can really create nice use case and in doubt better broaden a little bit the targeting and have attribution set in place so you can see what format performs to you, what channel performs to you for you, and then just increase the spending on those formats.
Thanks. And this leads me, I think, nicely into one specific channel, which is podcasting. And Jim, we are getting absolutely blown up in terms of questions about podcasting. And I know that can be answered by everyone on this call, but when I think podcasting, I think PodcastOne, specifically you. I think some of them we'll cover later on in the Q&A, but a couple of them kind of are really well aligned with the conversation we're having and a question I had in mind for you. So, one thing I wanted to ask you was, I think of podcasting as a particularly interesting source for audio. It's very different to me when than when I think about a live stream event or, music streaming, because there's sort of a relationship that you're engaging with. There's a conversation that's more intimate that's taking place that you're engaging in. Whether or not the attention or focus is greater, who's to say? Maybe you. But I was kind of curious just in general how advertisers are engaging with podcasts. But I do think that there's a question that came up in Q&A that you could also help us answer in tandem, which is how effective is programmatic audio within podcasting, and what's the best call to action? Oh, and no, Jim's freezing as that happens.
Are we doing it again? All right, let's see. Whoa.
Jim, we need you. We're back.
Okay, if I move location. No, so great questions all around. The effectiveness of programmatic, it's a good question. And I've been working on it for about 2 years now to really try to optimize the stream for podcasts. When you look at it, you have to treat it as a standalone channel. So treating it like you would regular streaming audio or even broadcast before that, it doesn't really work.
Oh. Jim, we lost you again.
It was kind of a timely mic drop, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Very intentional all around here.
Well, I see that his mic's coming back. There he is. Hey, right. Jim.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry again for my unstable internet today.
No worries. If you want to go off camera, sometimes that can help a little bit.
All right, if I freeze again, I will certainly drop it and we'll see.
Okay.
For now though, so the efficacy to treat it as a different channel works
Right on time. It happened. Jim, if you can hear us, I think dropping the video might be helpful.
All right, video is out. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right, deepest apologies again, everybody.
No worries.
When we're looking at programmatic audio for podcasting, to treat it as a standalone is the best case here. What we found starting to work really of recent is we can do host-driven messaging that we can then run programmatically. So that tends to be the most effective for programmatic advertising. So we're able to sync with our agencies, our clients ahead of time, get enough messages recorded that make sense depending what the client's looking for, the case. And the most effective thing for podcasting is to have that kind of host-led, host-endorsed spot. It feels more authentic to the audience, and it feels...
Ooh, we just lost Jim again.
Can you hear me once more?
We can. I'm thinking dial-in might even make the most sense for you. And if you want to try that out, one of the things that Jim and I had actually talked about the other day that I thought was interesting was he had talked about host-read ad spots and how they're incredibly effective, not just for, the podcast in which that host is specifically, hosting, so to speak, but that can also be incredibly effective in utilization across a network of, podcasts that have a very similar type of audience. And Jim, I think you dialed into audio. Do we have you? Yay, there we go.
Okay. So yeah, the lean in here with audio, getting a host read spot, that's kind of where I was leaning into. It tends to be the most effective thing for podcasting. The lean in nature of our programming is to have that kind of host direct connection with your audience. So having a host do the message, even programmatic, it's easy to sync offline, get it done ahead of time, and then you can deliver that message to that show and even across our network. Because a lot of our hosts are influencers and they are known outside of just their universe. So being able to have some of our hosts deliver it to the widespread podcasting network can increase efficacy because it's not necessarily a generic voiceover, but some hosts who can experience the product are actually recommended directly. It feels more like a friendly recommendation.
Yeah, and the question actually, as I'm rereading it, is, and I want to make sure I get it right, is can programmatic audio also be effective to promote a podcast?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we were talking about KPIs a little bit earlier. One of the interesting things that has really developed in the podcast space in the last probably 12 to 18 months is that there are a few companies that are doing podcast attribution specifically. And we partner with a bunch of them, but what they can really do, especially for podcast advertising, like advertising on another podcast, is you can actually link up both podcasts so you can see that listeners coming from the one that you advertised on to the one that you're promoting. So just through some tagging, not even pixeling or cookieing directly, just tagging the spots a bit through the programmatic channel and then again through the final product podcast, you can actually get user maps to see who came from one to the other as the campaign is running.
That's amazing. And you mentioned how podcast is evolving. Cameron, I want to ask you from the Pandora perspective, how has music listening and streaming really evolved during quarantine? I mean, in particular, I'm thinking about the fact that no one's commuting or most people aren't commuting. So what have you seen happen with streaming habits? Are they going up? Are they going down? Or times changing? Give us an overview.
Yeah, and there's some great information that we've released as a company over the last, I think we have 2 studies over the last 6 months. And obviously COVID's affecting everyone. We're literally sitting on this virtual panel right here. So yeah. There you go, how much it is affecting everyone. From a user perspective, it's actually been interesting, right? So when you looked month to month, and let's say the first full month was March, going from March to April, we did see some drop in our users, right? But when you sort of pull that out and you look quarterly, so you look at Q2, our users actually remained more or less flat. When looking at the numbers quarterly. So I think the amount of people that were streaming audio didn't change much. But we have seen, to your point, sort of the shift in sort of how they are consuming that audio. So some stats that I have here is that from the beginning of the year to now, daily streaming audio duration, the amount of time people are listening has increased 32%.
Wow.
Per household streaming audio is almost up to 4 hours, which is up close to 50 minutes a day. And then in terms of looking at like the genres that are sort of popping up during this time, hip hop, pop, EDM, those are always consistently steady. There's not much seasonality there. But we have seen as, the genres, 70s music, 80s music, 90s music, as well as Kid Station are all popping up at the same time. So the theory behind that is, parents are home with their kids now, listening to music they grew up with, and also listening to more Kid Station, which I thought were pretty interesting. Where we have seen the decrease, though, is sort of in-car listening, which, it's sort of stating the obvious at this point. But the makeup has actually been great from a connected home standpoint. So we do see connected home usage up in the last 3 months, 42%. So because we've seen this shift in sort of user behavior, that's actually changed some things for Pandora and SoundCloud internally. We've actually accelerated making connected home inventory available programmatically. So that's actually going to be available to the general audience in Q4. And that's mainly due to the shift in consumption. This was something that was sort of on the roadmap for middle of Q1 next year. But with everything that's changed, it's sort of accelerating that growth just because we want to be where the users are going.
Yeah, I have to say, programmatically, we build out a lot of PMPs for our clients. And in particular, we focus on building them out from a digital audio perspective, which is how I know a lot of you, from working with you to build out PMPs for our clients and create, very specific curated channels for them. And one of the things that has been very obvious to me from that perspective is over the past few months, more often than not, I'm being asked, do you want connected speaker or do you want,
Right.
home devices included as a device type? And it's interesting because it's generally not part of the conversation that we've been having with our advertisers to this point, because frankly, it wasn't available, or if it was available, it was incredibly expensive. It was through like a Sonos specific channel and probably 2x the CPM. So it is fascinating that, we're seeing the scale come through. We're seeing the inventory now, be pushed more and more so programmatically. And with that, obviously becomes a decrease of rates and a more competitive, request for it. So that's all super interesting. And, I'll kick it back over to Jean-Louis since, he works with clients very heavily, as Cameron talks about all of these changes that have been happening because of COVID and because of quarantine. I imagine that's taken an impact on the way that you guys think about strategy around programmatic audio campaigns for your clients, or even its implementation and optimization. Can you give us a little insight into what that's looked like from, the client perspective over the past few months?
Obviously there were huge challenges for everyone. So we did the obvious. We created in the home packages, PMPs, a lot of them with basically a lot of connected devices, brands like Sonos, obviously, but also desktop, because we had, audio is usually much more mobile than desktop inventory. It's like 70-30, but during the COVID period, this was not true anymore. We had a lot of desktop inventory and also audio gaming. So we kind of packaged that desktop audio gaming connected devices and crafted PMPs for advertisers and buyers to reach in the home. Because that's where everyone is listening in digital. So that's one of the first thing we did. The second thing we did, I'd say, is as a team, we did show a lot of flexibility for everyone. So we had a lot of clients that had to shift and change their creatives, like from dining out into takeaway, that kind of thing. So we had to be very flexible and help them into creating those things. We also had more inventory, because it's true that some pure play had a flat audience, even a little bit, sometimes a less audience. But on the other hand, we had channels like with a lot of news that were picking up strongly. And so we found ourselves with really a huge audience. And what we did with that is that we shared a lot of that audience also with governments. We had quite a few governments across the world that started to create campaigns around safety, around COVID. And we gave some impression at low on revenues there. So it also were kind of special campaigns to run. I mean, otherwise we did really have our preferred buyers in programmatic, so PMP, PG. We gave them much more priority into that new audience, and we also kept them really up to date on trends. We had like the pure play, something crazy that happens that usually on Friday everything is falling. There is no more audience, and the weekend it's kind of low on digital audio. I mean, usually on Saturday plus Sunday we have less audio than just on a normal weekday. But it was not true anymore during COVID. We had plenty of audio during Saturday and Sunday, so we could create weekend strategies as well, and that was really interesting. So yes, challenging time, but interesting time for audio indeed.
Yeah, and Lauren, just to add to that, onto what Jean-Louis said, you know, and he brought up a good point about sort of the weekend traffic. You know, I think for all of us on the phone, you know, the first few months of COVID, you know, there were a lot of cancellations, things being paused, but that started to shift, I'd say about 6 to 8 weeks ago. You know, people that had money, whether it was an MLB or the NCAA tournament or the NBA playoffs, although they're back, but not really. I think a lot of those dollars have been shifted programmatically and then more so into the podcasting or audio channels, just because it makes it so easy to transact. So Jean-Louis' point, we used to see a dip in volume on the weekends, you know, it rebounds Monday, but that traffic has actually been steady just because we have a lot more users on our platform and a lot more advertisers bringing bigger budgets programmatically and just trying to transact quickly through audio channels.
And also new advertisers. I mean, okay, we lost some like travel fell down, but I mean, all the e-commerce, the PayPal, the Amazons of the world, the Netflix, we've seen them all and started spending quite well. So we found a lot of new advertisers in the ecosystem in programmatic the past couple of months.
Yeah, and it would be negligent of me not to get Chris in on this. I mean, Chris, you guys touch every type of streamed audio, you know, from live events to, you know, podcasting to music. You know, how has inventory composition really been changing from your perspective across it all? Yeah,
and you know, to Jean-Louis' point and Cameron's as well, I feel like the programmatic space and the budgets have been relatively resilient through all this. You know, TuneIn made a shift about a year ago to be 100% programmatic, and we do still, you know, operate with some managed service business, but for the most part, it was a bit of a fortuitous move for us. I feel like the cancellations and the things that we would have been dealing with in March weren't as much of a problem for us, and we were able to maintain pretty well. So that's been nice. Also, you know, to back up a little bit on the content and the way people have been consuming through this pandemic. You know, obviously, to not to belabor the point, but smart speakers have been blowing up. You know, they had been for us for a long time, for multiple years. TuneIn is a platform that has always prided itself on being integrated in places wherever a person wants to consume. So if they're on the road or they're at a gym on a treadmill or, you know, listening on their Sonos devices, TuneIn allows them to access that content. And, you know, that obviously picked up even more during the pandemic. But from a content perspective, obviously sports listening was down. There weren't a lot of sports to listen to. Although people were rampant looking for, you know, sports podcasts, sports news, the business of sports didn't cease by any means. But the one place that we did see just, you know, significant growth is in our news and informational content. You know, it's 2020. Obviously, there was a lot going on before COVID. There's an election coming up. Most people are aware of. People were coming to TuneIn to inform themselves about the various races, whether it's on the federal level or the local level. Obviously, we have local news content. We also have, you know, your major platforms like CNN and MSNBC and Fox. As COVID struck, that sort of took shape in a different way. Again, people want to keep themselves informed of what's going on. They want to understand what's happening at the federal level, but they're also interested in phase reopening in their local neighborhoods and communities and what that looks like. So and then we move into the summer and this process of our listeners educating themselves on social reform and what that means and how they can do more in that capacity. These are all things that we see our users very engaged with throughout the year. And, you know, as COVID comes and goes, other things have taken shape, and really that consumption of news and informational content hasn't ceased at all. It's just continued to grow. And, you know, obviously smart speakers being the place where we've reaped the most benefits. In terms of that inventory, we've done a lot of work over the past 3 years. Sorry, my team always tells me I talk too much. I feel like I haven't talked too much. We've done a lot of work over the past couple years to sort of optimize the TuneIn experience for connected devices. And, you know, whether that's Alexa, Google Home, Sonos, or Bose, you know, the treadmill that I was talking about, a golf cart, or, you know, we're pre-installed on all Tesla vehicles when they come off the lot. And the reason we do that is so people can access that content wherever they are. But what that also allows us to do is benefit from that growth and begin to carve out new rotations and new inventory opportunities for our partners and allow them to sort of speak to people with contextually relevant messages in those sort of listening environments that they find themselves.
I love it. And I had a couple more questions that I had planned to ask you guys, but we are actually getting a really engaged Q&A section, and I want to make sure we have, you know, 15 minutes or so to answer them all. So I'm gonna, you know, glaze over the nice little ending best practices type questions I had for you guys and dive into some of these specifics that we've been getting pinged with along the way. I'll kick this one off with one from Cecilia. And in particular, this was earlier on, but I think lends itself to what Chris was just saying and what we've all sort of been touching on is, you know, Cecilia said she read an eMarketer report that indicated digital audio doesn't have the metrics they need to measure a campaign's success. Their projected digital radio ad spending will shrink about 17% this year, but rebound next. What's your perspective as a panel on that eMarketer report?
Wrong, obviously. No, I mean, actually, I'm quite surprised. We've been looking for data partners, I mean, relentlessly and all the time, and we are now getting really nice data partners that can, you know, just get the right metrics. By default, I mean, it's very mobile. So till now, we have a lot of device IDs, and it's much more qualitative than any cookie there is, I would say. And even for the non-addressable, I would say, traffic, I mean, we still have IP user agent to work with. So, and we've done a lot of campaigns with, I mean, partners like Kpis, where they can really track basically traffic and I mean, on the ground, and they know what app you've been using, what are you listening to, and if you did go to the shop, yes or no. I mean, that's it's obvious. So, and yeah, we can measure campaigns, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Cameron.
I wanted to just to pile onto that as well. I completely agree with Jean-Louis. You know, we welcome open measurement at Pandora, right? I think one of the biggest sticking points or one of the things that makes us a differentiator is all of our audience is 100% addressable, right? So everyone's logged in. So to Jean-Louis' point, we pass mobile ad IDs, which can be measured with any third-party measurement. So Millward Brown, Kpis, for example, you can measure you can measure, you know, site action, foot action within a store, awareness, branding, lift, all of that. So I think generally when you marry programmatic and audio, there is some education that needs to be done from all of us talking to our advertisers about measurement, how to measure success, how to look at a 30-day conversion window, because audio might be at the top of the funnel, but it is part of the path to conversion to reach users. And looking even from radio to streaming audio, you know, I could be driving a car and, you know, like Chris could borrow my car and he's getting the same radio ad that, you know, I'm listening to as well. But with streaming audio, we're able to sort of target that user. So your dollars are working harder for you, I think.
Yeah, and Katie actually asked, and this was something that Jim had said earlier, he had mentioned tagging ads within podcasts to see where users are coming from. And I think this fits in nicely with what we're sort of touching upon right now, which is attribution and tracking. Jim, can you expand on that a little bit for Katie and add in anything else that you think is relevant to podcasting attribution and tracking?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of extends from the points that Cameron and Jay were making, because if you look at audio, I think we're really poised nicely to continue to move forward from multiple standpoints. To Cameron's point, when you have login, like actual user attribution and actual deterministic data, that's one thing. For podcasting, we've been in a space where, because listenership is so fragmented everywhere, you can listen on a multitude of devices, but I'm still the origin for everything that I produce. We've had to develop solutions on top of just using things like IDFA, because unfortunately we don't always get it from people like Apple, who I'm sure you all know with the changes coming up next year is going to provide some more difficulty for mobile advertising coming from Apple. So as Jay alluded to, we largely use IP address and device or user agent for a lot of our attribution through podcasting, because it's just a basic HTTP request. So we're going to get that no matter where you're at. So luckily, a lot of the companies like Millward Brown, I work closely with Claritas, Barometric, many others, frankly, we can pass them the IP address and user agent, and through kind of ID maps we have on top of first-party data, we can put those pixels with our audio ads, and they're able to get all the data they would usually need, and we can help fill in some of those blanks to really get an accurate picture for who's getting your advertising. And then to the opposite end of that, to find out where it's going to, a few things. If you're using a company, like some of the actual attribution companies for like web traffic, some delivery there, if you install a pixel from them, Codify will get contracts, everything very privacy focused. We can actually identify those users, cross traffic, no problem. For other podcasts, we have a similar solution. It's just they kind of install similar software to their media that we would install on ours. And that's how you can kind of get these IP and user agent combinations between who's listening to what podcasts and what locations. So that's all very helpful. And even to add to the point of like foot traffic, I've been working with Foursquare recently to kind of test out their solution. They were very based on IDFA previously, but in the last 3 months or so, to help get into the podcast space, we've been working on IP address tracking as well and user agent. So we're building these data maps with a lot of companies. So I think that in what audio has already had to offer across the board, and then what we've had to develop to kind of do some of the workarounds for what podcast enables, I think we're really poised now nicely for attribution. And as Apple is making their kind of changes to IDFA, and I'm sure others will follow suit, we're at a really good spot to continue doing what we're doing and not really lose any steam as a medium. So even some of these trackings in terms of, what Programmatic is going to do on audio, I don't necessarily know if they're accounting for. I think display and video programmatic can take a bit of a hit because of their lack of ability to track in a new way. And they'll catch up as audio has had to in the past couple of years, but it's going to be interesting to see their kind of reaction to a medium that we're already kind of ready to respond to.
Yeah, it almost seems like an evener of the playing field a bit.
Yeah.
Not to pile on, Jim, but there are a lot of podcast questions that have been coming through, and of course, everyone else, feel free to chime in as well. But one in particular coming from Kate, I know a lot of people are listening to podcasts that have been downloaded. How does that impact ads that are time sensitive, promotion focused? Are programmatic audio ads running against downloaded content or only against streamed content for this reason?
We can do it both ways. It's part of just the conversation as we're setting up supply packs and deal IDs. So we can separate things out by people who are listening streamed, people who are downloading. You can do the whole bucket. We have that kind of granularity into insight. So if you're like a big brand retailer running a 3-day sale, we're only going to want to serve it to those streams. And we could do two things. We could serve a different ad to people that are downloading or just exclude that audience. So we have that flexibility depending on kind of what matches the brand goal with KPIs directly.
Yeah. And to add to Jim's point quickly, I know, Lauren, you're running short on time, but
no, go.
We recently, outside of Connected Home, we recently released our podcast marketplace. Obviously not as robust as Jim's. We should talk after this, Jim. But, we can separate the inventory as well, too. So, your audio streaming's obviously more addressable than your podcast inventory. So you don't have to mix that inventory as well. Yeah.
And I think this is the last one. Nope, it's not, but maybe the last one for right now to pile onto Jim. How do you view the evolution of podcasts from a download medium to a streamed medium?
That's a good question. I think it's going to continue as data is getting cheaper for people to own and stream. I think it's going to be increasingly stream versus downloading. I think what we're doing, and I think other people are starting to do, is lean into some live events where people are actually live streaming podcasts, either via audio or video or both, to kind of call back something that Chris was talking about with, some of the TuneIn programming, where it's almost event programming. So I think podcasting is starting to add a layer of that to itself to try to get some of those kind of more live ears on top of the downloaded ear.
Love it.
Jim, we'd love to help you amplify that content, so just let us know.
And this one's for the
I went first.
technically he's AUDIENCEX's first and foremost.
I'm glad my internet's not freezing right now, so we're all
we're all fighting over Jim. But this one's actually for the group. For smart speaker inventory, how does a brand layer in data targeting? And I'll let whoever feels comfortable take that one.
Same way you sort of layer it, or the same way you work programmatically within your DSP or with us at Pandora. So you can layer on. We have sort of a two-pronged approach. We have first-party proprietary data that's backed up by Comstor. We can layer that in for you on our end, or the same way you'd set up a programmatic audio campaign and layer it through your DSP. It's sort of the same tactic in that sense. With connected, I don't have the info in front of me, but I believe our connected home inventory is somewhere between 60 and 70% addressable. So not as much as streaming audio, but you are able to target and frequency cap the majority of the audience that you are seeing. So it's a similar tactic you would setting up a streaming audio programmatic campaign.
It's an interesting question. We have some issues basically because everything is nearly addressable on our end, Targetspot, but it's more like the database are not ready yet to know those device IDs. I mean, those devices are just not known and so not enriched yet. However, those brands have usually very nice data and studies and information about their users, and they just know a lot of things. So it's still possible to run very accurate campaigns across devices because you know who is using. I mean, we are working a lot with Sonos or Stingray at the moment. We just know who they are, the users for those platforms.
Yeah, from our perspective, we sort of look at it in a similar way. With connected devices, not all of it is addressable, but we do know a lot about our users, and advertisers know a lot about theirs. So we'll do things, take a look at their listening interests and habits, and sort of model out inventory pools and allow people to, cast a more tighter net around their audience, even though that device may or may not be fully
It's also, there is a lot of families behind, right? So it's not that one person. Really, when you're tapping into that audience, you're talking to a host. So it's a bit different when you're working with those devices.
Great.
Yeah, you get like 4-for-1 impressions also.
Yeah, exactly. We are almost at time, and we do still have some questions. So, for any panelists who are comfortable sharing their emails in the chat with the total audience, please do so that, our attendees can reach out to you directly if you're comfortable with that. I think, there's a lot of more specific questions, but I do want to kind of wrap this up nicely. If you had one major takeaway, to give someone in a 2-second snippet who's leaving this programmatic audio panel in terms of a best practice or in terms of a thought starter for Q4, what would it be as we close off the panel?
I would say if you're testing audio for the first time or even programmatic for the first time, I would say testing audio in a vacuum by itself, maybe the first time, might not be the best solution for your business. Depending on what your KPI is, I would say layer that on with a display action or some type of video tactic to really see that full funnel attribution, how audio can help the other channels. But yeah, if anyone wants to talk more offline, I'm going to shoot my email into the chat as well.
Awesome. Anybody else? Closing thoughts? Chris, Jean-Louis, Jim?
I would just say when you're thinking about audio, think of all the things that people are listening to these days. More and more audio consumption is on the rise. And like I said earlier, they're engaging with a lot of different content. So, you know, whether it's podcasts or music or news and sports, I mean, basically, if you include all four of us on your audio strategy, you're doing well. So that would
Okay.
Chris,
One note for me. I would say that Targetspot alone has more than 70 million uniques in the US. So I think that scalability is not much of a problem. It's more performance. And if you want to know tips and tricks to perform in your other campaign, don't hesitate to contact us. And I'm sure that the others have as many uniques too. So audio really has scalability.
Yeah, and just to say, audio, special digital audio, if we look at a lot of surveys, metrics done over long periods of time, it tends to be a very high value user. So when you're putting that into your media plans, I think we can always have a conversation about KPIs in here because it's a different growth curve in broadcast. We have different availabilities, different opportunities here, and it's truly a lean-in medium. So getting a very active audience who's engaged with the product is something that I think goes a really long way for advertisers to support it.
Awesome. Well, I want to just take a second to thank every single person who helped, you know, with this podcast today. You were all, or podcast, with this webinar today, you were all fantastic. We will be, you know, sharing the recorded version though, for anyone who wants to listen in later or, you know, refer back to anything that was said. All of the panelists were kind enough to share their emails, and I've gone ahead and forwarded them out to all the attendees in the chat. So please feel free to grab those down if you want them. But, you know, thank you, everyone. I think we're heading into an awesome Q4 and a lot of good things to come when it comes to audio.
Awesome. Nice chatting with all my colleagues. Talking to you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody.
great to
Thank
hang
you.
out with all of you, Lauren. Really appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks,
Bye.
Lauren.
Thank you, Rowan.